On a rainy afternoon in a bustling city cafe, fate was about to weave together two very different lives. A young woman, nervous yet hopeful, sat by the window waiting for her blind date. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes, nor did she carry an expensive purse. Instead, she wore simplicity like a crown, with a soft scarf around her neck and hands clasped tightly together, betraying her unease. For her, this was not just a blind date, it was a chance at companionship, perhaps even love, after years of struggle. Across town, a man stepped out of a sleek black car. He was a single father, a man who carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, yet wore a smile whenever his little boy was around. Life hadn't been easy for him either. Though he was a CEO, wealth did not fill the emptiness in his heart. The boardrooms and business deals gave him success, but not joy. His closest friends convinced him to go on this blind date, reminding him that even CEOs deserve a second chance at happiness. With hesitant steps, he walked toward the cafe, unsure of what awaited him inside. When their eyes first met, it wasn't sparks or fireworks, it was something gentler. A quiet recognition, as if two weary souls found a reflection of themselves in the other. She stood up nervously, almost knocking over her chair, while he quickly extended a hand with a warm, reassuring smile. They introduced themselves, but words seemed too small to contain the storm of emotions quietly rising within. As they sat down, the waiter approached with the menu. He glanced at it casually, but she hesitated. She looked at the prices, then at her modest purse, and her eyes fell. Her heart sank because she knew she couldn't even afford a simple coffee in such a place. Embarrassment burned her cheeks. Finally, with a trembling voice, she whispered, I can't afford coffee." For a moment, silence hung in the air. She expected him to laugh, to frown, or perhaps to make an excuse and leave. But instead, he simply looked at her, his gaze filled with kindness, and smiled. Without hesitation, he told the waiter, 2 coffees, please." That smile wasn't out of pity, it was out of understanding. He knew that money wasn't what defined a person's worth. In that instant, he saw her honesty, her courage to admit vulnerability, and it touched him more than any expensive dress or polished words ever could. The waiter nodded and walked away, leaving the two of them in a silence that was no longer heavy but comfortable, almost like a shared secret. She blinked back tears, unsure why his simple act of ordering coffee meant so much. But in her life, where she had often been judged for her poverty, this small gesture felt monumental. He didn't care about her financial struggles, he cared about the person sitting across from him. As the minutes passed, conversation flowed more easily. She spoke about her struggles, working long hours, caring for her younger sibling after their parents had passed, and sacrificing her own dreams so others could have a chance. She admitted that sometimes, she felt invisible in a world that measured people by their bank accounts. He listened intently, not interrupting, not judging. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't about his success or wealth. Instead, he told her about his son, about the nights he stayed awake worrying if he was doing enough as a father, about the loneliness that came even when surrounded by people. For once, he wasn't a CEO, he was just a man, stripped of titles, sharing his heart with someone who saw beyond the surface. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the cafe window like a melody to their story. Strangers walked past with umbrellas, but inside that small cafe, it felt as though time slowed down just for them. They laughed at small jokes, they shared silent glances that spoke louder than words, and they both realized that this blind date wasn't just another meeting, it was something rare, something fragile yet powerful. When the coffees arrived, she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, savoring not just the drink but the moment. He watched her with quiet admiration, realizing that true beauty often hides in the simplest of things. It wasn't her clothes, her status, or her background that drew him in, it was her resilience, her honesty, and the light in her eyes that refused to dim, no matter how difficult life had been. Hours slipped by without notice. The cafe, once full, slowly emptied, but they remained, reluctant to leave the magic of that afternoon behind. Finally, when it was time to go, he insisted on walking her home, holding his umbrella above her so she wouldn't get wet. The city lights reflected in the puddles as they walked side by side, two souls who had met as strangers but were already connected in ways neither could explain. At her doorstep, she hesitated, unsure if this was goodbye or the beginning of something more. But before she could speak, he smiled again, the same smile that had calmed her fears earlier, and said, "I'd like to see you again, if you'll let me." Her heart swelled, and for the first time in a long while, she felt hope blooming inside her. She nodded softly, unable to hide her shy smile. In that moment, she realized that love doesn't always arrive in grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the form of a man who orders 2 coffees and smiles when you admit you can't afford one. Their story didn't end there, it had only just begun. Over the weeks that followed, they continued to meet. She brought laughter into his son's life, filling the empty spaces left behind by loneliness. He, in turn, brought stability into hers, showing her that love could be gentle, not demanding. Together, they discovered that family isn't built on wealth but on love, trust, and the courage to see someone's heart beyond their circumstances. The world might have seen them as mismatched, a wealthy CEO and a struggling girl, but to them, they were simply 2 people who found in each other what they had been missing all along. The coffee cups from that first date became a symbol, not of what they lacked, but of what they gained, a chance at love, acceptance, and belonging. And so, every time they met at that cafe afterward, he would order 2 coffees, no questions asked, both of them remembering the day their lives intertwined over something as simple as a drink they shared. The act that began with kindness grew into a love that no amount of money could ever buy. This story reminds us all of a powerful truth: wealth, titles, and appearances may impress, but they do not sustain the heart. What sustains us is kindness, vulnerability, and the courage to accept someone exactly as they are. Love is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about being there when someone admits their fears, their struggles, and still choosing to stay. The single dad CEO thought he was going on a blind date arranged by a friend, never expecting anything more than polite conversation. The poor girl thought she was stepping into a situation where she might not belong, carrying with her the weight of her insecurities. But fate had other plans. In their honesty, in their brokenness, they found something whole. And maybe that is the most heartwarming part of all, that sometimes, love doesn't find us when we're at our best, but when we're at our most vulnerable. It finds us when we whisper, "I can't afford coffee," and someone answers not with judgment, but with a SM.